Hey everyone, and welcome back to another NASCAR Cup Series season review video. Today, I'm going to go over the 2003 NASCAR Winston Cup Series season, which I finally was able to finish watching, and I have a lot to talk about. This season, very different one from others I've watched because this was the first of the pre-playoff era that I've ever watched in full. So, first time I've ever watched a full season points format season, racing back to the line, first time with that, some other rule changes that happened during this season. A lot to unfold with that, so let's get right into it and let's talk about the season as a whole before we get into some major bullet points. I've now watched 18 NASCAR Cup Series seasons, and 2003 came in at a 64.9 out of 100. Now, it's average race rating, 64.9 out of 100. That actually ties it at 14th place with 2005. I'll give it the tiebreaker because its best race had a higher rating than 2005's best race. Kind of interesting to see it that low, tied for 14th out of 18. Because the early 2000s, a lot of people talk up of being one of NASCAR's peaks, if not NASCAR's peak, in terms of seasons. And such a great time to be a fan, and the sport was so mainstream and popular. The personalities were great. The drivers, where we had the old guard and the new guns, and a lot of those new guns ended up becoming people that we watched throughout childhood, and it was just such a great time. The early 2000s were an amazing time to be a NASCAR fan. And while I'll agree with the feeling of the early 2000s, right, from watching the broadcast, it did feel a lot more fun, energetic, a lot more lively. It felt like NASCAR was a legitimate sport and being treated as such by the TV partners, Fox and NBC. I will say for the racing, the nostalgia drug doesn't get you with that. Maybe for someone that really, obviously I have no nostalgia drug for 2003 or 2002 or any of these older seasons because I never watched them live. But maybe for someone who has watched them live, they still have that nostalgia drug, and they'll still have the kind of rose-tinted glasses for the racing. In my opinion, I didn't enjoy it all that much. I felt like the racing was poor at times. Now, granted, while there weren't that many great races, there also weren't that many terrible races. Just a lot of the races fell in the middle. That's why the average couldn't really change all that much because so many races kind of fell right on top of each other, right in the middle. The ranking kind of just stayed, I do believe, throughout the season, pretty much in the middle, in the mid 60s or so. But yeah, that's really what I have to say about the season as a whole. So now let's get into some major talking points of the season and address the elephant in the room immediately for the full season points format. And most importantly, did it impact or affect my enjoyment of the season at all, seeing Matt Kenseth basically dominate the season and go out there and win the championship a race early? And a short answer, no, it didn't impact my enjoyment of the season at all. I still, I'm someone who will watch the race for the racing and not necessarily watch it for some points battle or some championship battle or some, forced championship battle. I'm there to watch the cars on the track, and the points battle is kind of a secondary thing that kind of accompanies that. So, yeah, I really would not care if NASCAR went back to a full season points format. Sure, do it. Why not? That's probably never going to happen, but I would not be opposed to it. That's for sure. It didn't change anything with the season. TV just found something else to talk about. If you can't find something to talk about on the racetrack, then you also have a problem with your on-track racing product. If you need to create point scenarios to put good racing, you probably don't have that great of racing in terms of that. So, and prime example of this is Homestead didn't matter. Matt Kenseth locked up the championship a race early at Rockingham, went to Homestead, didn't even need to start the race to become champion. He literally already had the trophy in hand, and Homestead ranked 74 of 100, ranked 9th of the 36 races. So Homestead, a race that literally did not matter for the championship, was one of the highest races ranked in the season. It was a top 10 race, absolutely phenomenal race. and it didn't matter for the championship. So that just shows that, hey, the on-track product can still be good even if there's no championship points battle to go along with it. The points battle doesn't mean everything. At least it shouldn't mean everything. The racing on track should be number one. The points battle should be a story that goes along with it, if there is one. That's my opinion on it. Now let's move on to some interesting parallels that I noticed between this season and current day NASCAR. And that's why 2003 somehow directly reminded me of a next gen season. I was sitting watching, and it was kind of like, I think a few races in, it didn't take all that long. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm just watching like an old version of next gen. While the cars are literally completely different, the the early 2000s Gen 4 and the next gen race very, very similarly. And here's why. Uh, in the early 2000s Gen 4 car, they had pretty big spoilers on the cars. I don't remember the exact height. I want to say 6.25 to 6.5 inches tall. Created a lot of downforce and very high corner speeds. Much like how the next gen car has a lot of downforce, a lot of grip, creates high corner speeds. This in turn causes Goodyear to bring harder tires, so tires don't really fall off as much as they probably would want to, which then obviously creates a lot of track position. With higher corner speeds, harder to make passes in the corners, there's a lot of dirty air. We know the story of that, right? We've been through it so much, 550, and now with the next gen at places as well. And there were battles in 2003 that were hindered by dirty air. Um, for example, the end of the Pocono race was going to be pretty close, but Kurt just couldn't break through the dirty air to get up and challenge the leader. Even the end of Dover, Jeremy Mayfield battled with Ryan Newman. Newman did everything he needed to do, parked his car in front of Mayfield, and Jeremy just couldn't pass, and that list goes on and on. There are a lot of instances where dirty air and fast cars would get stuck back in the pack, and they couldn't fight through it all because there was just so much dirty air, and it was so hard to pass with how big the spoilers were and all that other stuff. So it just kind of directly reminds me of like, you know, and at points just kind of the randomness of races, where you get a caution, the field splits in strategy, you get another caution, the rest of the field splits in strategy, and then it's just like the running order is so jumbled, right? And at that point, with how little the tires mattered and how hard it was for faster cars to come through the field, you didn't need to have a fast car. You just needed to have the track position at the right time. It kind of sounds similar to what we're going through now, where you just need the track position at the right time. And the whole, tire thing, right? Nowadays, we're talking about we need softer tires, softer tires, right? Goodyear is the only key to success for the next gen car to create good racing at tracks like the short tracks and the road courses, stuff like that. Um, Funny enough, we were going through the same thing 10 years ago and then 10 years before that as well. Back in 2003, right? The whole talk was these tires do not wear out at all. This created an interesting scenario which created a lot of fuel mileage finishes because cautions would come out. Say the fuel window was like 65 laps on an intermediate, right? The caution came out with like 75, 72 to go. Field would come in and pit, and then they would hope to get enough yellows to save enough fuel. The tires would last easily, so they just needed the yellows to make it. And even if people came down and pitted, the new tires weren't going to be worth all that much. They weren't going to be worth anything, really. So you could still stay out in front. Ryan Newman did this so much, where he stayed out in old tires and just held everyone off, right? He saved the field to make it. He won the race. He had the track position at the end when it mattered most. So, yeah, we're still in, we're in this weird cycle of like every 10 years we decide to put more downforce and more grip, higher corner speeds, right? And then we go, I wonder why the tires aren't as soft as they were. I wonder what could be causing that, right? We did this in the early 2000s. They solved it by taking downforce off the cars and softening the tires. Then we added more downforce back to the cars in the early Gen 6. And it was like, I wonder how we can soften these tires. And we removed downforce. Oh, those tires soften. And now here we are again. We've added downforce. And we've added grip. And it's like, I wonder how we can soften the tires. Maybe it's the answer the last two times. But I don't know. We'll let NASCAR figure that one out still. We'll keep them they have their scientists, their engineers back at the R&D trying to figure that one out, and maybe they'll come up with an answer soon. Let's also, this kind of intersects with next gen stuff as well, and this is an interesting one. Uh, Parody is fun and can definitely be fun, but forced parody and just too much parody can actually really hurt not only the race itself, but the season as a whole. And what I'm getting with that is to set this one up. I think it was the Bristol night race. They had interviewed Matt Kenseth, and they were asking him around this time. A lot of people were talking about, there needs to be some sort of format change. Matt Kenseth is running away with it, but he only has one win on the season, while people like Kurt Busch and Ryan Newman are winning a lot of races, but they don't have a shot at the championship at this point. Something needs to change about the points format. And Matt Kenseth went and said, yes, we haven't won all that much, but we've run really well. We've run well enough to win other races. We just haven't been able to put it together. But if you look at the people that have been chasing us in points, they don't have all that many wins either. And to Matt Kenseth's credit, that was absolutely true. There were a few people that were kind of swapping back and forth between second place and points by that time in the season. Dale Jr. had only one win, and it came at Talladega at that point in the season. Jeff Gordon, at that point in the season, only had one win, and it came at Martinsville pretty early in the season. Kevin Harvick, at that time, had only one win, and it came just a few weeks prior at Indianapolis. So, yes, the people chasing Matt Kenseth in points also had their share of low amounts of wins. But parity will do that, right? Of the first 12 races of 2003, 11 of them were won by different drivers. 17 total drivers won a race in 2003 out of the 36 races. That's a high amount of parity, and it could honestly be too high, and it could have impacted the championship battle, because when you have that much parity, it becomes a lot harder to run consistently well. Because if you have 25 cars that can any given week show up and contend inside the top 5 or top 10 and maybe win given the right circumstances, you then, to consistently run well, need to have everything go your way. Right? You can run perfectly fine. You can run perfectly normal. You can do everything right, and yet fate could still take something away from you. An ill-timed caution, right? You could go and say, this is our strategy. We're going to pit now, and then we're going to pit again here. But if a caution comes out the wrong point, other people leapfrog you. Now you're stuck back in like 15th, and there's so much parity, right? Everyone's running nearly the same speed. You're not moving through the field. You had the fastest car, but guess what? You're only fastest by like a tenth, right? You were fastest, and when you were in clean air, that tenth was pulling you away a tenth every lap. But back in dirty air, that tenth, it's now 0. You're equal with everyone else because of the dirty air. So the parity in that regard, Matt Kenseth's team did an amazing job finishing well basically every single week and getting top 10s and top 5s and top 3s to add up to their points, where other teams like Juniors and Gordons and Harvicks were so inconsistent that they couldn't consistently put runs together to keep themselves in the championship fight. That's an interesting thing that was brought up, and really just wanted to bring that up because of Matt Kenseth. Matt Kenseth saying that at Bristol, and I was like, oh, that's an interesting point. Never really thought about that, but it is true, is that the amount of parity does create that, where it's like, yeah, we only have one win, but so many people have won races this season. Who doesn't have one win at this point? So it's just, I think it was funny. So let's start moving away from the parallels to the current day next gen NASCAR, and let's just go talk about 03 for a little bit. And let's talk about how extremely dangerous 2003 was. It felt like a season that had a death wish. Probably a season that should have had someone die, whether it be a driver or a pit crew member. It just kind of felt like it was going to happen. It was just incident after incident. I was like, oh my gosh. I was like, what is happening? I was like, why is this season so dangerous? And let's first start with fires. There were a lot of fires, whether it be from guys backing into the wall hard and catching on fire. There was a big pit road fire at one point, Kevin Harvick at Watkins Glen. There was also an engine fire, or a lot of engines caught on fire after blowing up, but the biggest one was Ryan Newman in the first Michigan race. Engine blew up, caught on fire, and the fire actually got into the cockpit. I think Ryan actually described it later on as like the scariest moment that he's had in a race car, which I can absolutely see because he's still traveling along at like 100 miles an hour on fire, looking for a place to stop and get out as quickly as possible because he can't breathe because there's smoke and fire extinguisher stuff and whatnot. So probably a scary moment. If I had to guess, I haven't been in that position, but I wouldn't want to be. Ironically, in the second Michigan race, Rusty Wallace's teammate had a very similar blow up. Wasn't as crazy, but it was pretty similar. So that was interesting. So that's one thing. Pit road incidents. There were a lot of those. Um, for starters, at Indianapolis, Dale Jarrett. So this actually started a rule change. Where they started putting the pit road speed limit line, they moved it further out onto the racetrack. The reason for this was where it was before this was it was basically right up against the start of pit road. So if you had the number one, or I guess the last pit stall on pit road, which is the first pit stall on pit road, depending on how you look at it. But if you have the one right at pit entry, you have to really slam on the brakes, and because you're not wanting to slow down too early, right? You're going to slow down right at that line, but if your pit stall is basically right after that line, you need to slam on the brakes and then turn in. And Dale Jarrett just kind of locked them up, and he spun into his pit stall, hit his jack man, threw him down against the wall, and then the jack actually ended up sliding down pit road. Luckily, was caught by a NASCAR official, so that was scary. Fortunately, the rule changed, and then it became a bit safer on pit entry that way. There was an incident at Talladega where Elliott Sadler got into Jeff Green and flung Green's jackman into the air and down pit road. Unfortunately, he didn't land into the path of any cars, but that was a scary moment. And then the biggest one, which we'll talk about a little bit more, was New Hampshire. Jeff Gordon and Michael Waltrip hitting, and Gordon going up and through Jimmy Johnson's pit crew members. So we'll get to that in a little bit more. Also want to talk about driver injuries, a lot of those in 2003. Biggest one, Jerry Nadeau in his practice crash at Richmond, ending his NASCAR career. Fortunately, didn't suffer life-threatening injuries, but it was scary, touch and go for a little bit. The lead up to the Richmond race was very somber, very sullen. It was unlike anything I think I've ever watched for a NASCAR race, because I've never watched the 2001 Rockingham pre-race. But yeah, this was a very somber mood before the Richmond race because of the Jerry Nadeau crash. It was very sad to see, actually. So that one happened. Jeff Green at Pocono in the DEI 1 hit where Steve Park basically wrecked nearly identical in the DEI 1 at Pocono the year prior, where Park flipped. Except this year, Pocono decided to reinforce the guardrail with earth. So that means they put dirt behind the guardrail, and dirt doesn't normally move when packed together like that. So it was like Jeff Green basically hit a concrete wall, got flung back into well, he didn't get flung back into traffic, but he got flung back across the infield, and I do believe he broke something from that hit. He hit so hard; it was a vicious impact. And then Kyle Petty at Bristol, he had one of the higher G crashes at the time in NASCAR, and I believe he got hurt some way. I don't remember, like concussion, broken something, injured something. If I'm not mistaken, he had to sit out maybe for a race. I could be misremembering, but I do believe he had something wrong with him after his big Bristol crash. Brett Bodine in a Michigan practice crash, another practice crash, where he hit the wall in turns 1 and 2, and then either was knocked out or dazed, or the throttle was hung, but he then went full speed into the inside tire packs, which hit pretty hard. He had to sit out as well. And then Dale Jr. at Dover, where he got a concussion, and he says he didn't fall unconscious. I do believe he did fall unconscious. There's an onboard, which for some reason NBC showed and stayed on, where they had a safety crew member in there, trying to get Jr. out of the car. It did look like he was, like, alert at first, and then maybe fell unconscious, I don't know. But there was a point where the safety worker was, like, holding his head up, and they let go of his head to go do something with, like, belts or something, and then Jr.'s head dropped back down. Once again, I don't know why NBC stayed on that camera for so long, but they did. But that's like the major ones. I'm sure I'm actually missing some that I'm not remembering, but yeah, there was a lot of big crashes and big, scary moments in terms of driver safety in 2003. And speaking of driver safety, let's talk about, ironically, another topic that somehow parallels with current day NASCAR, especially after Daytona and Atlanta this year, and that's racing back to the caution flag. So, 2003, last year, they ever raced back to the caution flag. They banned it after the Dale Jarrett incident that everyone knows about. But even before 2003, there were so many instances of like this being a terrible idea, and 2003 just reinforced that. And finally, the Dale Jarrett thing was the final nail in the coffin for NASCAR to take action on changing this. Let's talk about a few examples of what I'm talking about. So let's start with Texas. There were multiple examples from Texas. The main one I want to talk about, Jeremy Mayfield was trying to get a lap back, racing back to the caution flag, but the wreck had happened on the front stretch, and the two cars that had crashed were stalled basically on the second half of the quad oval. So, the leaders slow down because the crash is there, so they get back to the caution flag, and then Mayfield comes flying in, doesn't get his lap back, but comes flying in and narrowly skates between the two wrecked cars. And if he would have hit one of them head on, dear God, it could have been bad. But fortunately, he didn't, but unfortunately, it was way too close for comfort. And then there was, I believe, yeah, same race. Matt Kenseth was leading. Jeff Gordon was second. There were lap cars. I want to say Jeff Burton was one of them. There was another Roush car, and then there was Ricky Rudd in the Wood Brothers car. Caution comes out. The leaders are like backstretch turns 3 and 4. Matt Kenseth slows. He lets Jeff Burton get his lap back. But he also wants to let his other teammate get a lap back and his Ford teammate, Ricky Rudd, get a lap back. So he's slowing to let those guys get a lap back. Jeff Gordon sees this and he goes, wait a minute. I don't want to let everyone get a lap back. So Jeff Burton was already in front of Jeff Gordon, so he couldn't stop that. But Gordon starts speeding up to try and, force Matt Kenseth to get back to the line. But Matt never speeds up. Jeff drives by him, gets back to the caution flag first, and keeps those guys trapped a lap down. Ironically, those guys would have beat Matt Kenseth back to the line if Gordon also slowed down. But if the rule is racing back to the caution flag, then Jeff Gordon raced Matt Kenseth back and should then be the leader, right? If in the term it's racing back to the caution flag, you're still racing, you can still change positions. But NASCAR, for some reason, didn't see it that way. They said Matt Kenseth has every right to slow down, and Jeff Gordon should slow down with him. But that's not what the rule says. The rule says you race back to the caution flag, right? If Matt Kenseth wants to slow down under that rule, that is his prerogative, sure, but he can also pay consequences if he slows down too much to try and let too many people get laps back, right? If someone says, I don't want to do that, they can try and pass. It was supposed to be the gentleman's agreement, which wasn't a written rule, but NASCAR made it into a written rule at Texas, which made absolutely no sense. So what NASCAR had it then originally was they called it Matt Kenseth is still the leader of the race, even though Jeff Gordon beat him back to the caution flag. Matt Kenseth is still the leader of the race, but those two guys that Jeff Gordon kept a lap down are still a lap down. And the Fox booth rightfully pointed out, well, wait a minute. If Matt Kenseth is the leader, and those two lap cars didn't beat the leader back to the line, how is Matt Kenseth the leader then? Because they beat Matt Kenseth back to the line. So you either had to have it Matt Kenseth is the leader, and those two beat Matt Kenseth back, so then they're back on the lead lap, or you have it Jeff Gordon is the leader, and those two guys are still lapped down because they didn't beat Jeff Gordon back to the line. NASCAR fortunately resolved it. Granted, I don't think they did the right thing. They said Matt Kenseth is the leader, and those two guys are back on the lead lap. But that already made me question the rule and why it was still in place in 2003, how it stayed so long. But then there were other races that made me question. A big one I want to point out is Fontana. That kind of directly impacts current day NASCAR and kind of the rulings with cautions on the last lap, because this one actually happened on the last lap, coming to the white flag even. So in this one, Jimmy Johnson, Mark Martin are battling for a spot inside the top 10. They get together off turn 4, they wreck. The first few cars took the white flag under green, so they are forced to race back around to the checker flag at full pace. That's fine, because fortunately for Mark, he spins off to the infield, and Jimmy gets his car back going and out of harm's way, right? The leaders are not aware in this and racing back to the checkered flag. Everything actually works out there. The issue I have is everyone behind the crash racing back to the caution flag, which is also the white flag, because once again, you're racing back to the line. This is for your finishing position, so every pass you make actually counts. And so Jimmy Rex, he's basically in the middle of the track. He's up against the wall, sure, but he's far enough off where it's like, it could get dicey. Is he coming back down the track? Is he staying up high? You don't know, really, inside the race car. If you're going at him at 109 miles an hour, you don't know where he's going to go. And the scary part is, a few cars did come close to him, but they're racing back at full speed, right? Some people didn't even let off the gas. They're going right on by. And that's where it's like, people are like, well, on the last lap of races nowadays, we should just let people race back to the caution flag, or race back to the checker flag. And it's like, yeah, you want that, but like, people are going to fly into the crash, right? People will say, oh, no one would ever fly into a crash, but people would. If drivers back in 2003 were going to do it, drivers in 2025 would do it too, right? They'd say, oh, there's an opening, I'm going to go for it, and then a car comes down the track and they clobber the car that's coming down the track because they thought there was a hole there. In my opinion, that Fontana race really was like my thing of like, this is ridiculous. Like, what were we doing racing back to the caution flag? And also, like, racing back to the caution flag, actually, in an instant like that, creates a negative for being right behind the crash. If you're not even involved in the crash, right? If those two guys wreck in front of you and you slow down because the crash is happening right in front of you, you have to slow down, otherwise you're going to be in the crash. But then some people, like 5-10 car lengths behind you, stay in the gas, go full throttle by you, and you lose 5 spots because of it. It's like, well, how is that fair, right? That, like, if the caution came out immediately, I keep my spot because I maintained a cautious pace. But if I'm racing back to the line and I'm still however many 100 yards away from the line, and people are able to stay in the gas and I can't because I'm right behind the crash, that's just not all that fair. So, yeah, that's something interesting with that. And then obviously the final nail in the coffin, which we'll talk about now, is the second New Hampshire race, which actually had a lot that happened in it as well. So we'll go directly into racing back to the line and how that is now gone because of this race. So if you're not familiar with what happened, Dale Jarrett crashes off turn number 4. His car is hit hard enough where it's stalled in the middle of the track. He can't get going. The caution flag comes out, but the leaders have not yet taken the caution flag. So they're not racing back, but Bill Elliott is letting off to try and let people back on the lead lap. Meanwhile, there are lap cars flying by left and right, trying to get back on the lead lap while they still can. And there are other lead lap cars like Michael Waltrip and Ryan Newman that are saying, well, we do not want to let all these guys get laps back. So they start trying to push Elliott. They're trying to speed up to get Elliott to speed up. And this creates a whole logjam of like Waltrip and Newman. They're moving lanes and they're blocking lap cars, and people are having to slam on the brakes. And there's this huge pack scrambling within each other coming off turn number 4. They're hitting each other, they're getting sideways, and Dale Jarrett's car is sitting there right in the middle of the track just waiting to be hit. Fortunately, it didn't get hit, but there were a few close calls, and I mean, who knows if he was further back, basically off of the corner, what could have happened. And fortunately, NASCAR looked at that and said, all right, enough's enough, and they said, once the caution flag comes out, you will slow down. You won't immediately slow down, but you will gradually slow down to a cautious pace. You are not racing back to the line anymore. When the caution is out, the caution is out at this point. Then they introduced the lucky dog rule, which is still a thing to this day. Highest scored car 1 lap down gets a free pass back onto the lead lap. And if you can believe it, back in 2003, among the drivers and the fans and the commentators, the lucky dog rule was seen as too much of a gimmick, which is crazy to me. The lucky dog rule, if you can even consider a gimmick in current day NASCAR, if I were to label the lucky dog rule as a gimmick, it is maybe the lowest, right, in terms of gimmicks that NASCAR has. It is like off of the list in terms of gimmicks. We have playoffs, eliminations, points resets, one race championship, stage cautions, option tires. We have so many different things that are gimmicks in NASCAR. And back in 2003, the biggest thing that people were worried about was the lucky dog and someone getting back onto the lead lap. To me, that is just absolutely outstanding how that's like that was such a big thing back then. Was like, I don't know if we should have this. It's a gimmick. I think it was like Jeff Gordon was like, yeah, it's like it's too much entertainment in terms of over sport. And I'm like, whoa. Like, this is absolutely insane. I think what really caused it was like, I think it was the first race actually was used was Dover, and Ryan Newman won it after getting the lucky dog. And then there were some other races where people were getting the lucky dog and finishing well, and I think it left a bad taste in people's mouths. But yeah, I just found that funny that the lucky dog was a huge gimmick, and drivers and everyone were calling it out, and now we have like a million gimmicks in one to try and make races interesting, which is just really, really funny. Uh, so that was one rule that changed because of that New Hampshire race, but there was another rule that changed from that New Hampshire race, and it was the aforementioned pit road incident where Jeff Gordon and Michael Waltrip hit, and then Gordon got into Jimmy Johnson's pit crew and sent them up over the hood, and I think he got like 3 or 4 pit crew members in one swoop. That created a rule of passing to the inside at pit entry. So basically, what happened, if you're not familiar with that one, is Jeff Gordon had the third pit stall on pit road. Jimmy Johnson had the first, and Michael Waltrip had the second. Now, Gordon didn't know that Michael had the second pit stall, and the reason he probably didn't really know that was Jimmy had the number 1 pit stall, so Michael needs a little bit of a wider berth to get into to get around Jimmy. But Gordon, not realizing that Michael's pit stall is right in front of his, he tried to cut inside of Michael's to be like, all right, I can game the timing lines, I can try and speed up a little bit, get some distance, and gain a few tenths, maybe gain a spot or two on pit road because of that. The issue was Michael's then going into his pit stall, and it slams Jeff Gordon into Jimmy Johnson's pit crew. They go over the hood, and NASCAR says, well, that was stupid, and then they come up with a new rule of you have to be single file entering into pit road. You cannot pass to the inside at pit entry. A very good rule, still in use today, and actually, I think the last time it was maybe ever enforced or needed to be enforced was 2016, I want to say, Kentucky, where Truex passed Harvick entering his pit stall and rightfully got black flagged for it. But yeah, that was a good rule change needed to happen, and it happened immediately after that crash. So bravo to NASCAR there. They made a quick rule change there, and it worked out. And one final thing about New Hampshire is I actually want to play a clip from that New Hampshire race. This one is actually of a pit road call. I think one of the best pit road calls I've ever heard. In the middle of watching 2003, I actually learned that Bill Weber had passed away. We all learned that. I was in the middle of watching 2003 when it happened. In fact, I think I was like just starting the NBC TNT portion of the season when that happened, which Bill Weber was the pre-race host and then the a pit road reporter for this season. And I have to say, an amazing pre-race host. His Countdown to Green segment's always amazing. I loved skimming through them to see some storylines and how Bill kind of set things up. He just knew how to make it dramatic and also keep it lighthearted at the same time. He had really good scripts with him. And he was also a very good pit reporter. I may not have liked him all that much as a play-by-play announcer, but he was one heck of a pit reporter and one heck of a Countdown to Green guy. But this is actually one of his pit calls. This comes late in the race. Fuel mileage ending at New Hampshire, long green flag run, and the leaders are having to make splashes of fuel pit stops, right? So they're coming in for a splash of fuel and going. Michael Waltrip is the favorite to win this race. Has a fast car, has the track position. He's bound with Jimmy Johnson for this race victory. If he has a clean pit stop, if everything goes green to the end, Michael Waltrip is going to win a non-super speedway race. And then he leaves with the gas can, and Bill Weber has an amazing reaction to just show how suspenseful the moment was.
Here comes Michael Waltrip. The leader is in. 29 laps to go. On the pit road, just a couple of seconds of fuel. The can, he took the gas can with him. He took the gas can with him down pit road.
Oh, no.
There'll be a penalty for leaving the pit stall with equipment.
So there you have it. That was Bill Weber's, in my opinion, one of my favorite pit calls I've ever heard from anyone in NASCAR, courtesy of Bill Weber. So that is it from my 2003 review. A lot to talk about there, a lot to compare to even current day NASCAR somehow, but that's just how it works out. So thanks for watching. If you made it this far, I'm thinking of probably going back to 2002 next to continue my trend backwards. I was thinking about going to 2021. I don't know if I could put up with 550 intermediate races though, so probably save that for a little bit. Maybe go back to '02, see if it compares to 2003, if the racing's the same, and also see how 2002 was because the championship battle was pretty entertaining for most of the season. So yeah, probably go back to '02 next and see how it goes from there. So thanks for watching. I'll see you guys for the next one.